The PlayStation 3 had an enormous library of games, some not so good as others. In this video, we'll be taking a look at the top 10 worst PS3 games of all time. For this video, we're only looking at exclusive games, so with that being said, let's get right into this with number 10. Number 10, Lair. Lair was one of the PlayStation 3's first big exclusives after its launch. The visuals looked awesome, the concept was unique, and it became one of the most anticipated games of 2007. One word can describe Lair, and that's disappointment. The graphics and soundtrack were on point, but the controls were horrible, especially considering the 6-axis controls couldn't be turned off originally. Even with the analog controls being patched in, it isn't anything good. You've still got the poor level design, terrible camera, and repetitive gameplay. Number 9, SOCOM US Navy SEALs Confrontation. This is one that stung really bad for many PlayStation fans. SOCOM 2 and 3 were games fans spent hundreds of hours on back in the PlayStation 2 days. Then came SOCOM Confrontation on the PS3. Many were expecting similar level of engagement from this game, and it was just not to be. At launch, the game was riddled with bugs. It wasn't just a bug here and there, it was bad, almost unplayable. There was lag, the online was pretty much broken. Then when you do play the game, you realize there's a lot of content missing and only 7 maps. Online servers were shut down in 2014, so it isn't even possible to play this anymore, although I don't understand why you would anyway. Number 8, GENJI Days of the Blade. GENJI Days of the Blade is a game many people know about due to the hilarious giant enemy crab meme that originated back at E3 2006. Let's forget about that for a second and talk about the game itself. Generic gameplay, a poor camera, and a dull world. On the positive side, for a launch title, the graphics were top tier, but as gamers have always said, graphics aren't everything, and that rings true for GENJI Days of the Blade. Number 7, Last Rebellion. The PlayStation 3 was a hotbed for Japanese RPGs, but as is the case with the genre, it is very hit or miss. Last Rebellion was a gigantic miss. You've got visuals that look like a PSP game, a boring story, and an uninspired world. The only redeeming quality about the game is the combat, and even that is just interesting. There are so many better options for JRPGs on the PlayStation 3 that Last Rebellion is a game that you shouldn't even give a second thought to. Number 6, Mobile Suit Gundam CROSSFIRE. As a big fan of Gundam, even I can't defend the atrocity that is Mobile Suit Gundam CROSSFIRE. This was a launch title for the PlayStation 3 and one of the more looked forward to. Then we played the game and saw the bland graphics that looked mediocre for a PS2 game. The gameplay was unpolished and the game was filled with technical issues. Fortunately, the PlayStation 3 saw several other Gundam games in its life, even if none of them were amazing, at least they weren't as bad as CROSSFIRE. Number 5, The Fight Lights Out. The Fight Lights Out was actually one of the most anticipated PlayStation Move titles. A fighting game with PS Move made all the sense in the world. But then comes the problem of playing The Fight Lights Out with its poor motion controls, lack of polish, and what you have is an incompleted product sold at a complete price. Aesthetically, the game is actually not bad, but for a fighting game, gameplay is king, and the gameplay was in the toilet for The Fight Lights Out.
If you try and pull a dirty move out of the bag whilst you're in the middle of a crazy combo, the game may not recognise it properly, and that can become confusing for you.
Number 4, Racket Sports. PlayStation Move brought with it a lot of shovelware, but some of it was actually okay. Racket Sports was not okay. There is barely any content to the game, the motion controls barely worked, and it was an absolute joke that the game was being sold at full price. The PlayStation Move had a lot of games that were just a collection of mini-games, but they were so much better. Racket Sports was just a waste of time and money. Number 3, Kung Fu Rider. Kung Fu Rider is another PlayStation Move game where you have to move through Hong Kong in a sliding office chair, and it falls victim to the same problems of Racket Sports. Poor motion controls, little content, and inconsistent gameplay. Kung Fu Rider may have actually been an okay game to laugh at if it was a $10 PSN title, however, considering it was released at a full price, you really can't defend it. Number 2, MAGUS. MAGUS was one of the later games on the PlayStation 3 released back in 2014. The game is an action RPG, and right off the bat you can notice that this is a game with an extremely low budget. Not only are there poor visuals, but the game is far from a finished state, bugs, glitches, etc. The gameplay is okay at first, and then a few hours in it becomes extremely repetitive. MAGUS falls well below average in every single category of being a video game. It's not worth your time or money. In fact, you should be paid to play this game. And finally, number 1, HAZE. It's funny how the whole gaming world has forgotten about HAZE. Back in 2008, before the game's release, people were calling HAZE to be the Halo killer for the PS3. The game was to develop into a series of titles and become a big franchise, and then when we played the game, it became very apparent that this was not going to be killing Halo at all. It wasn't anywhere in the same galaxy in terms of quality. The single player had bad design, horrible characters, and an uninteresting story. Not to mention that single player could be finished in 4 to 5 hours, though I commend you if you actually stuck through the whole thing. And considering the first-person shooters that were out at the time, games such as Unreal Tournament 3, Call of Duty 4, Halo 3, Resistance Fall of Man, there was no way HAZE was touching any of those games. The concept of HAZE was interesting, but poor reception prevented a sequel from ever getting off the ground. So that wraps up our countdown of the top 10 worst PS3 games of all time. What do you think? Agree with our list? Disagree? Was there a game that you thought should be on this list but wasn't? Was there any game on this list that you actually enjoyed? Let us know in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.